Hey Wargamers, way back in 2019, I was offered the opportunity to create my own wargaming model, and I took it, not knowing exactly the steps I would have to go through or the length of time it would take to make those visions a reality. But today I am very excited to announce that that model is complete, it has been in production, and it is indeed available for you to pick up. Now, the model itself is a multi-part resin kit coming with 3 head options and 2 weapon options, making for 6 total combinations that can be created using it. And I want to share those options with you today, tell you a little bit about the model, but I also want to share with you the design process, the philosophy, the ideas that went into it as something that is hopefully entertaining, but also informative if you ever want to embark on this type of endeavor yourself. So if you are just interested in the model, you can either skip to the end or check out the description below for details, but let's jump into the design process. So I had some general ideas of the types of traits I would like to see presented in the model, but I am not an artist. I cannot draw. And so, just having those ideas is not very useful for a sculptor. And so I had to partner with a concept artist in order to create illustrations of what I would like the model to look like, of course. And so these are some initial sketches of those, vague ideas that I conveyed to the artist. And so basically he went through this process with me, taking my ideas that I had written down and conveying them as sketches. And so basically he would present me with a series of options, and then I would just select the particular parts of each one that I liked to carry forward into the next version, right? So I'd say, I like the helmet of this, I like the feet of that, I like the shoulder of that one, right? And then we would mix them all together and then tweak them. I say, make this larger, make it smaller, make it, angled differently, however you want to think about that. And so that's the process that we went through with this design. And the fact that it wasn't me just creating the sketches, that, there's this series of back and forth was good because I obviously cannot draw. And it also allowed for some new ideas to creep in there, right? Like it's not just my pure ideas. It was a collaborative process, but it did take time, right? It took time, and there wasn't a perfect way to translate what was in my mind into a graphical form. So, it's definitely a process, a back and forth process. And that took a lot of time to kind of hone this in to something that was, pretty close to what I was thinking of in my head. And then, of course, we went through the same process for the rifle, right? He has a weapon. We have to go through this process of picking out the things that I like and things I don't like on this. Here are some of the different concept arts for the rifle that he has. You can see several of these elements are kind of mix-matched into the final version. Same too for the backpacks. We had various different backpacks. I wanted it to be something substantial, something that seemed like it had some level of sophisticated technology in it, but also a technology that was integrated into the rest of the armor. And so after a process of months of going back and forth on these different design elements, we arrived on this type of character summary here where you can see the finalized character. He's not posed or anything like that. He's just presented in a way that conveys some of the details to the sculptor. And he also has his rifle set aside, his backpack set aside, his blade set aside. So all these details can be picked out clearly by the sculptor when they take this concept art and start, converting it into an actual sculpt. And so with the core design relatively solidified, we can move on to posing. And so having a model just standing there looking off in the distance generally isn't very exciting, but I wanted to have something that really conveyed a sense of action, a sense of momentum, that felt like, okay, this is a character that is on the battlefield doing really important, awesome things, not just standing there pointing at things. So I went for this idea of, kind of a guy running and maybe, opportunistically jumping off of a drone, right? So he's running and there's a little drone next to him and he can kind of like, wall jump off of it or something like that, right? And so that's kind of the idea that we started with here. And you can see these, vague sketches of different options for posing in terms of, how the character is interacting with this drone. finally, we ended up on something that looks like this, where you see how the character is kind of pivoting off the drone. The drone's kicking up some dust behind it. There's this sense of momentum with the cape kind of going in his original trajectory, carrying his momentum forward. And then we see all the different elements on top of each other, right? The rifle's in his hand, the blade is on his side, the backpack is behind him. But, you can kind of get the sense of what we're really going for here and how all these different elements combine to make a single model that I think has a good sense of momentum and something that is desperately needed in a lot of different contexts, right? There's a lot of models out there that don't have a large sense of momentum, and the ones that you look at and you say, wow, that looks really awesome, are the ones that do have that momentum, that have that action, that convey a sense of grandeur or scale or importance on the battlefield. And so I think we did a fairly good job arriving at a design that does some of that. And so all this art, this kind of character summary and the finalized concept art is all sent to a sculptor, a different sculptor, a different part of the world. And they take this art and convert it into a 3D format. And this process, too, is a collaborative, iterative process where they take the art and they might view it in a totally different way than the artist and I view it when we're developing it. So there's a back and forth here, too, right? Like, oh, no, this is actually something going out versus going in, or this should be larger or smaller or tweaked in this angle or something like that, right? And of course, they also have to fill in different gaps, right? You don't have a fully 3D presentation from a 2D image. So they have to, kind of fill in some gaps and figure out how some things connect and stuff like that. So again, a lot of back and forth that took months to complete. But we arrived at this completed sculpt of the initial model, and I was really happy with it. I think the hardest part of this whole process is actually getting a sense of scale, whether we're dealing with a 2D render or a 3D sculpt. Getting a sense of scale for what this is really going to look like in a tabletop is really hard. I think we did pretty good. I think it hits the mark, but it wasn't easy. It was not as intuitive as you might think, because a lot of the scale that we're dealing with in a miniature format is not the scale of reality, right? Heads are bigger, features are exaggerated. It's not like you can just take an image of someone and shrink them down to, tabletop wargaming scale and have the proportions be correct. So there's a lot of this minor tweaking that needs to take place, and that took a lot of time. I'm really happy with how it turned out, but it took a lot of time. And so after we had this completed model, I wanted to add some variation, right? I wanted to have some additional options on top of what we had already established. And that process was a lot easier, right? We could, relatively easily say, okay, this is most of the work is done. Let's just tweak a few things. And so in addition to having this, the basic helmet, the basic rifle, I also worked with the sculptor to create a helmetless option. So this is just an exposed head, and then an option to have a different helmet. So there's 3 different head options here, and then also the option to have a spear instead of a rifle. With that core model completed, I wanted to add some variety. I want to provide some options for the model aside from just the standard helmet, the standard rifle. And so I worked with the sculptor to create a couple different head variations and then also a weapon variation. And you can see that here. So there's a helmetless option where it's just an exposed head. And then there's an alternative helmet that I'm calling the Nomad helmet that you can see here, as well as a spear option. So you can either have a rifle or a spear. And so, like I said, you can mix and match these different helmets, these different weapons to get 6 different combinations. And so after this long process of working with the artist and the sculptor and the manufacturer, I was able to finally get resin sculpts. And I asked my friends over at Fight and Dice Studios to paint some up for me. They painted up 2 of the different sculpts for me. And those are the pictures that you're going to see here, just to give you a sense of what the model really looks like. Once someone's put some paint on it, right? So these are actual photos. These aren't renders like everything before. So here's the front of this, kind of standard model, and a rear view and a side view. And then here's one painted up with the helmetless option and the spear instead, and some additional angles on that as well. All right, so all in all, the kit includes 3 head options and 2 weapon options, just like we were talking about. It also has a 32mm base with the Invasive Wargaming logo stamped on the bottom. I thought that was cool, so I went for that. The base itself is separate from the rest of the model, so it's not like the drone or the dust cloud are integrated into the base. Those are totally separate. So if you want to go with a different base size, you totally could, and it fits just fine on a smaller or larger base. All right, so if you're interested in picking up one of these guys, it's pretty easy. This is my first time doing this, of course, but I've modeled this process after talking to the guys over at the Preferred Enemies podcast. This is the same type of process that they use for their dice orders and stuff like that. So I think it will work out well. Basically, I have a Google form for you to fill out in the description. Follow that link. It'll ask you some questions like, who are you? Where do you want me to ship it? How many models? That sort of thing. And so just fill that out. Once you do, your responses will be sent to me, and then I can send you a PayPal invoice at the provided email address. And once you pay that, then I will, complete the order. I will ship it to you. This is, of course, open to anyone worldwide. There is a difference in price depending on where you are in order to account for different shipping costs. But one major caveat is that supply is very limited. I have no idea if people are going to be interested in this or not. So I have a very limited supply. When we sell out, we sell out, but I will order more. It just will take a little bit more time to fill. So, of course, I won't send invoices for models I don't have or anything like that, right? So don't worry about that. But because the supply is limited, I'm going to limit it to 2 per order or 2 per person. So if you want more than 2, there's a space in the Google form for you to put that, so I can let you know when I get more in stock, that sort of thing. But otherwise, just max 2 per person. Fill out the form. I'll send you an invoice, and I will ship them out to you. It'll be pretty easy, pretty straightforward. So hopefully that all makes sense. Of course, if you have questions, put them in the comments below, and I will be happy to answer them. Again, I'm really excited to be able to share this with you. It's been something that I've been working on for a really long time, and it's just cool to have gone through this process. It gives me a greater appreciation for the sculpting process, for everything that the major companies do. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work, and I'm excited to have made it through this process. I don't know if I would ever do it again, but I'm glad that we're here, and it feels good to have something that I created in 3D on the tabletop. So if you're interested, again, check out the description below. But sincerely, thanks for watching, and as always, happy wargaming. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This channel is made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there as well. Really, the support means more than I could say, so really, thank you. Special thanks to Marcy, Andrew Lotz, A Little Pink Monster, Bennaby Jones, Durza, Everett Keller, Robbie Goodwin, Jose Gomez, Ruger, Drew Pratley, Michael Byrne, Zealous Brimstone, Scott Heater, Stephen Cowan, Jared Egler, Chris Kessler, Tao Oswell, and Shifty.